The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of the small cottage, casting long shadows across the wooden floor. William sat at the kitchen table, his hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. Across from him, Kate moved quietly around the kitchen, preparing breakfast with the same gentle care she had shown for the past 15 years of their marriage. They had always been a couple that others looked up to. Friends often said they were perfect together, and neighbors would smile when they saw them walking hand in hand down the tree-lined street of their quiet neighborhood. William was a teacher at the local elementary school, known for his patience with children and his warm smile. Kate worked as a nurse at the community hospital, spending her days caring for others with the same tenderness she brought to everything in her life. But something had changed over the past few months. The easy conversations had become stilted. The comfortable silences had grown heavy with unspoken words. Even their shared laughter, once so natural and frequent, now felt forced when it came at all. William watched Kate as she moved around the kitchen, her auburn hair catching the morning light. She was still beautiful to him, still the same woman he had fallen in love with all those years ago at the university library. He remembered that day clearly. She had been studying for her nursing exams, surrounded by textbooks and notes, her brow furrowed in concentration. When he had offered to help her with her coffee order at the campus cafe, she had looked up with those green eyes and smiled, and he had known his life was about to change forever. Now, as he sat in their kitchen, William felt that same life-changing moment approaching again, but this time it carried a weight of sadness that pressed down on his chest like a stone. Kate placed a plate of scrambled eggs and toast in front of him, her fingers briefly touching his shoulder as she did. The simple gesture sent a wave of emotion through him that he struggled to contain. How many mornings had started this way? How many more would they share? "Thank you," he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. Kate nodded and took her seat across from him. They ate in the kind of silence that spoke volumes, each lost in their own thoughts, each afraid to voice what they both knew was coming. The decision hadn't been sudden. It had been building slowly, like storm clouds gathering on a distant horizon. They had tried counseling sessions with Dr. Martinez, a kind woman with gentle eyes who had listened patiently as they struggled to explain what had gone wrong. But how do you explain the gradual fading of something that once burned so bright? How do you put into words the way two people can love each other deeply and still find themselves growing in different directions? William had gotten an offer to teach at a private school in Oregon, an opportunity that would let him work with gifted children and develop new teaching methods he had been dreaming about for years. Kate had been offered a position heading the pediatric unit at a children's hospital in North Carolina, a chance to make a real difference in young lives while advancing her career in ways she had never imagined possible. These were dreams they had talked about individually, late at night when they thought the other was sleeping. But when the opportunities actually came, they realized with heavy hearts that following their individual dreams meant walking away from the life they had built together. Neither wanted to hold the other back. Neither could bear the thought of asking their partner to sacrifice their future for the sake of staying together. And so, slowly and painfully, they had come to the only conclusion that felt right, even though it broke both their hearts. The conversation had happened 3 weeks ago, on a rainy Thursday evening as they sat on their old couch in the living room. William had been grading papers while Kate read a medical journal, both of them comfortable in their separate activities but together in their shared space. When Kate had finally spoken, her voice had been so quiet he almost missed it. "I think we need to talk about Oregon and North Carolina," she had said, not looking up from her journal. William had set down his red pen and turned to face her fully. "I've been thinking about the same thing." What followed was the most difficult conversation of their lives. They talked through the night, sometimes crying, sometimes holding each other, sometimes sitting in silence as they processed what they were saying. By morning, they had made their decision. They would pursue their individual dreams, even if it meant ending their marriage. But this wasn't a decision born of anger or resentment. There had been no betrayal, no falling out of love, no dramatic fight that pushed them apart. Instead, it was perhaps the most loving decision they had ever made together. The choice to let each other go so that both could become the people they were meant to be. Now, as William finished his breakfast and prepared to leave for school, he felt the weight of the calendar on the kitchen wall. They had marked it with a red circle, 2 weeks from today. That was when the moving trucks would come, when they would divide their belongings and their life together into separate boxes, when they would say their final goodbye. Kate stood to clear the dishes, and William rose to help her, as he had every morning for 15 years. As they worked side by side at the sink, their hands occasionally brushing as they passed plates and cups, William felt overwhelmed by the ordinary beauty of the moment. These simple daily rituals that they had shared for so long would soon become memories. "I'll be late tonight," Kate said as she dried her hands on the dish towel. "There's a staff meeting about the transition procedures." William nodded, understanding that she was talking about more than just her work transition. Everything in their lives now seemed to carry double meaning. As he gathered his teaching materials and prepared to leave for school, William paused at the front door. Kate was standing in the hallway, backlit by the morning sun streaming through the window behind her. For a moment, neither of them moved. "Have a good day," she said, her voice carrying all the love and sadness that words couldn't fully express. "You too," he replied, wanting to say so much more, but knowing that everything that needed to be said had already been said. As William drove to school that morning, he couldn't help but think about how love could be both the strongest and most fragile thing in the world. Strong enough to survive 15 years of marriage, gentle enough to let go when holding on would cause more pain than joy. The afternoon sun cast dancing shadows through the classroom windows as William helped his students clean up their art supplies. 8-year-old Emma tugged at his sleeve, holding up a drawing of 2 stick figures holding hands under a rainbow. "Mr. William, this is for you and Mrs. Kate," she said with a gap-toothed smile. "My mom says you're the nicest couple in the whole neighborhood." William's throat tightened as he looked at the innocent drawing. The simple stick figures seemed to capture something pure about love that he and Kate were about to lose forever. He knelt down to Emma's level, his voice gentle despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm him. "Thank you, Emma. This is beautiful. Mrs. Kate will love it," he said, carefully taking the paper and placing it in his folder. He knew he would treasure this drawing long after everything else was packed away. As the last student left the classroom, William sat alone at his desk, staring at Emma's drawing. The stick figures looked so happy, so certain of their place together under that crayon rainbow. When had life become so complicated? When had love stopped being enough? His phone buzzed with a text message from Kate, stopping by the storage unit after work. Need to start sorting through the holiday decorations. William closed his eyes, remembering all the Christmases they had celebrated in their little cottage. Kate always insisted on putting up decorations the day after Thanksgiving, transforming their home into a winter wonderland with twinkling lights and carefully placed ornaments. Each decoration told a story: the angel they had bought on their honeymoon in Prague, the wooden reindeer Kate's grandmother had given them, the collection of snow globes they had gathered from their various travels together. Now those same decorations would need to be divided, like everything else in their life. The thought of Kate alone in that cold storage unit, sorting through their shared memories, made his heart ache. He gathered his things and drove to the storage facility, a squat brick building on the edge of town. He found Kate sitting on a cardboard box in the dimly lit unit, surrounded by plastic containers filled with Christmas ornaments. Her cheeks were wet with tears, and she was holding a small wooden nutcracker in her hands. "Remember this?" she asked without looking up as he approached. "You won it for me at the county fair during our 2nd year of marriage. You spent $20 trying to knock down those milk bottles." William sat down beside her on another box, the metal floor cold beneath them. "You said it was the most romantic thing anyone had ever done for you," he said softly, "even though it was just a cheap carnival prize." Kate turned the nutcracker over in her hands, examining every detail as if seeing it for the first time. "It wasn't cheap to me. You saw how much I wanted it, and you didn't give up until you got it for me. That's who you've always been, William. You never give up on the people you love." The irony of her words hung heavy in the air between them. Here they were, 2 people who loved each other deeply, giving up on their marriage. But even as the thought occurred to him, William knew it wasn't really giving up. It was something much more complex and painful than that. "I've been thinking," Kate continued, still staring at the nutcracker. "Maybe we're not giving up. Maybe we're just loving each other in a different way. Maybe sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let someone go." William reached over and covered her hand with his, the nutcracker cradled between their joined fingers. "I've been thinking the same thing, but that doesn't make it hurt any less. They sat in silence for a while, surrounded by boxes of memories and the ghosts of Christmases past. The storage unit smelled of cardboard and dust, but William could almost smell the pine of their Christmas trees. Could almost hear the holiday music Kate would play while they decorated. The moving trucks come next Wednesday, Kate said eventually. I spoke with the company today. They'll be here at 8 in the morning. Next Wednesday. William felt something twist in his stomach. It was really happening. After weeks of talking about it, planning it, accepting it, the reality was finally setting in. In less than a week, they would no longer be William and Kate, the couple everyone admired. They would just be William and Kate, two people who used to be married. Have you told your parents yet? William asked. Kate shook her head. I keep picking up the phone, but I don't know what to say. How do you explain to people that you're getting divorced not because you don't love each other, but because you do? William understood her struggle. His own parents had been calling more frequently lately, sensing that something was wrong but not knowing how to ask. His mother had even offered to come visit, saying she hadn't seen Kate in too long and wanted to check on them both. The thought of having to explain their decision to the people who had watched them fall in love and build a life together felt overwhelming. We could tell them together, William suggested. Maybe have them over for dinner this weekend. One last family gathering before... He couldn't finish the sentence, but Kate nodded in understanding. Before we stop being a family, she completed quietly. They began working through the decorations together, creating 3 piles, Kate's, William's, and undecided. Some items were easy to divide. The ornaments Kate had made in her pottery class clearly belonged to her, while the sports-themed decorations William had collected over the years would go with him. But other items proved more difficult. The wooden advent calendar they had bought together during their first Christmas as a married couple sparked a gentle debate that lasted 20 minutes. Neither wanted to take it, and neither wanted the other to have to leave it behind. Finally, they decided it would go to William's sister, who had young children who would fill it with joy each December. As they worked, they found themselves sharing memories attached to each item. The silver bells Kate's college roommate had given them as a wedding gift. The ceramic Santa that William had accidentally broken and carefully glued back together, leaving a barely visible crack across Santa's red hat. The string of lights they had hung outside their first apartment, even though their lease technically didn't allow holiday decorations. Remember our first Christmas morning? Kate asked as she wrapped a delicate glass ornament in tissue paper. We were so broke, but we still wanted to give each other something special. William smiled at the memory. You gave me that book of poetry by Robert Frost, and I gave you that silly scarf I knitted myself. That scarf wasn't silly, Kate protested, laughing for the first time all day. It was lopsided and full of dropped stitches, but it was the most thoughtful gift I'd ever received. I still have it, you know. Really. It's in our bedroom closet. I wear it sometimes when you're not home and I'm feeling sad. It still smells like that cheap yarn you bought, but it makes me feel loved. William felt his eyes fill with tears. Even now, even as they were preparing to divide their life together into separate boxes, Kate could still surprise him with the depth of her love. She had kept that terrible scarf for 15 years, had turned it into a source of comfort during difficult times. As the afternoon wore on and they continued sorting through their decorations, William realized that this process was about more than just dividing their belongings. They were also dividing their memories, deciding which parts of their shared history each of them would carry forward into their separate futures. But perhaps, he thought as he watched Kate carefully pack away a snow globe they had decided she would take, the memories weren't really being divided at all. Perhaps they were being doubled, so that both of them would carry the full weight and beauty of their 15 years together, no matter how far apart their new lives might take them. When they finally finished, the storage unit looked strangely empty, even though they had removed only one small carload of decorations. Kate locked the unit behind them, and they stood together in the parking lot as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. One more week, Kate said quietly. One more week, William agreed, and they drove home separately, each carrying a piece of their Christmas past and the heavy knowledge of what lay ahead. Saturday morning arrived gray and drizzling, matching the somber mood that had settled over the cottage. William stood in the doorway of their bedroom, watching Kate fold clothes into neat piles on their bed. She worked with methodical precision, separating her belongings from his with the same careful attention she brought to everything else in her life. "Your mother called while you were in the shower," Kate said without looking up from a sweater she was examining. "She's bringing that apple pie you love for dinner tonight." William's stomach clenched. Tonight they would tell their families about the divorce. Kate's parents were driving up from the coast, and William's parents were coming from across town. They had planned this dinner weeks ago, back when it had seemed like a good idea to tell everyone at once. Now, as the moment approached, William wondered if they had the strength to get through it. "Did she say anything else?" William asked, sitting down on the edge of the bed. "She asked if we needed anything from the store, and she mentioned that she's been knitting baby booties for when we decide to have children." Kate's voice caught slightly on the last words. The subject of children had been a quiet ache between them for years. They had tried for so long, gone through tests and treatments and hope followed by disappointment. Eventually, they had made peace with the idea that their family would be just the two of them, and they had found joy in being the favorite aunt and uncle to their siblings' children, the beloved teachers and neighbors who had extra love to give. But now, as their marriage was ending, the roads not taken seemed to loom larger. Would Kate find someone else and have the children she had always wanted? Would William get that second chance at fatherhood that he had quietly mourned giving up? "We don't have to tell them everything tonight," William said gently. "We could just say we're separating, that we need some time apart." Kate shook her head, still folding clothes with mechanical precision. "They deserve the truth, and honestly, I don't think I can carry this secret much longer. Every phone call with my mom, every time your dad asks about our plans for the holidays, it's getting harder to pretend everything is normal." William understood. They had been living in a strange bubble for weeks now, going through the motions of their daily life while privately preparing for its end. To the outside world, they still looked like the same happy couple they had always been. Only they knew that beneath the surface, everything was changing. The doorbell rang at exactly 6 o'clock. Kate's parents, Margaret and Robert, stood on the porch with a casserole dish and warm smiles. Margaret immediately pulled Kate into a tight hug, commenting on how thin she looked and asking if she was eating enough. Robert shook William's hand with the firm grip he had perfected during his years as a construction foreman, his weathered face creasing into a smile that made William's chest tight with affection and guilt. William's parents arrived 10 minutes later. His mother, Eleanor, bustled in with the promised apple pie and a bag of groceries she insisted were just a few extras she had picked up for them. His father, David, carried a bottle of wine and immediately began discussing the latest baseball scores with Robert, the two men falling into the easy conversation of people who had known each other for 15 years of family gatherings. As they sat around the dinner table, William felt overwhelmed by the warmth and love of these four people who had welcomed him and Kate into their families with open arms. Margaret told stories about her volunteer work at the animal shelter. David shared updates about his retirement hobbies. Eleanor asked detailed questions about Kate's work at the hospital, genuinely interested in every patient care story she shared. This was what they were losing, William realized. Not just each other, but this sense of extended family, this network of people who had watched them grow from young newlyweds into the adults they had become. After the divorce, holidays would be different. Family gatherings would require awkward coordination. The easy intimacy of this shared life would be replaced by polite updates and careful boundaries. Kate seemed to be thinking the same thing. She participated in the conversation, laughed at her father's jokes, and asked all the right questions about everyone's lives. But William could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands trembled slightly when she reached for her water glass. After dinner, as they sat in the living room with coffee and Eleanor's apple pie, Kate finally found her voice. "We have something we need to tell you all," she said, her words cutting through the comfortable chatter. The room fell silent. 4 pairs of eyes turned toward Kate and William could see the exact moment when each parent realized this wasn't going to be good news. Eleanor set down her coffee cup with a small clink that seemed unnaturally loud in the sudden quiet. "We're getting divorced," Kate continued, her voice steady despite the tears that had begun to fall. "We've made the decision to end our marriage." The silence that followed felt endless. Margaret was the first to speak, her voice barely above a whisper. "But why? You two are so happy together. You're perfect for each other." Kate looked at William, a question in her eyes. They had practiced this conversation, had thought through how to explain their decision in a way that would make sense to people who loved them. But now, faced with the shocked faces of their parents, the words felt inadequate. "We love each other very much," William said finally. "That's not the problem. The problem is that we've both received opportunities that will take us in different directions. Kate has been offered a position at a children's hospital in North Carolina. I've been offered a teaching position in Oregon. So one of you turns it down," Robert said, his practical nature asserting itself. "People make compromises in marriage. That's what you do." "We thought about that," Kate said. "But these aren't just jobs. They're dreams we've both had for years. And we realized that asking the other person to give up their dream would eventually lead to resentment, even if we didn't want it to." Eleanor leaned forward in her chair, her motherly instincts taking over. "Have you tried counseling? Have you really explored all your options?" "We've been in counseling for 3 months," William said. "Dr. Martinez has been wonderful, but she's helped us realize that sometimes love means letting go." David, who had been quiet throughout the conversation, finally spoke. "When do you leave?" "The moving trucks come Wednesday," Kate said. "I start my new job in 2 weeks. And I need to be in Oregon by the end of the month," William added. Margaret began to cry then, soft tears that she tried to hide behind her napkin. "I don't understand. You two have been together for 17 years. You're like one person. How do you just stop being married?" It was the question William had been asking himself for weeks. How do you untangle a life so completely intertwined? How do you separate not just belongings and bank accounts but dreams and inside jokes and the 1,000 small intimacies that make up a marriage? "We don't know," Kate admitted. "We're figuring it out as we go. But we do know that we don't want to hurt each other any more than we already have. We don't want to become the kind of people who resent each other or fight over who gets what. We want to end this while we can still love each other." The conversation continued for another hour, with questions and tears and expressions of support that felt both comforting and heartbreaking. Eleanor offered to help with the packing. Robert suggested they might reconsider, that maybe they could try a long-distance relationship. Margaret worried about Kate being alone in a new city where she didn't know anyone. As the evening wound down and their parents prepared to leave, each couple took turns saying private goodbyes to Kate and William. The hugs lasted longer than usual, and everyone seemed reluctant to let go. After the last car pulled out of their driveway, Kate and William stood together in their living room, emotionally exhausted. The house felt different now somehow. The secret they had been carrying was finally out in the open, making their decision feel more real and more final. "That was harder than I expected," Kate said, sinking onto the couch. William sat beside her, close enough to feel her warmth but not touching. "They took it better than I thought they would." "Your mother is going to call me every day for the next month," Kate said with a weak smile. "She's going to worry about me eating enough and making friends and whether I'm really okay. My dad will probably drive to Oregon to check on me," William replied. "He'll show up unannounced with tools to help me hang pictures and set up my television." They sat together in comfortable silence, both thinking about the family dinner they had just endured and the many family dinners they would never share again. Outside, the rain had stopped and stars were beginning to appear through the clearing clouds. 5 more days, Kate said quietly. 5 more days, William agreed, and they remained on the couch together until long after midnight, not talking, just existing in the same space for one of the last times as husband and wife. Monday morning came too quickly, bringing with it the harsh reality that this was one of their last full days together. William had taken the day off from school and Kate had called in sick to the hospital. They both knew they needed this time to finish the preparations that had been emotionally too difficult to complete over the weekend. The house looked different now, half empty in some rooms where they had already packed away their individual belongings. Boxes lined the hallways, each one carefully labeled in Kate's neat handwriting. Kate, kitchen items. William, books. Kate, bathroom. William, office supplies. The labels were practical and efficient, but they felt like small knives to William's heart each time he read them. They worked together with the strange efficiency of people who knew each other's movements perfectly. Kate would start to reach for something, and William would hand it to her before she asked. William would look around for the packing tape, and Kate would slide it across the table to him without looking up from her own task. 15 years of marriage had created a rhythm between them that even the prospect of divorce couldn't break. "I found this in the back of the closet," Kate said, holding up a small wooden box that William recognized immediately. It was their memory box, something they had started during their first year of marriage. Inside were ticket stubs from movies they had seen together, pressed flowers from their honeymoon, love letters they had written to each other during a brief separation when William had gone to a teaching conference across the country, and dozens of other small treasures they had collected over the years. William sat down beside Kate on the floor as she opened the box. The first item she pulled out was a napkin from the restaurant where they had their first date, with Kate plus William Carson written in William's handwriting. "You saved this?" William asked, amazed. "I saved everything," Kate said softly. "I always knew we were going to be important to each other, even when I didn't know how it would turn out." She pulled out more items, a photo strip from a carnival photo booth where they were making silly faces, a program from the community theater production where they had met each other's parents for the first time, a cork from the bottle of champagne they had opened when Kate graduated from nursing school. Each item told the story of their relationship, marking moments both big and small. There was the hospital bracelet from when William had his appendix removed, and Kate had stayed by his bedside for 3 days. There was the business card from the bed and breakfast where they had spent their 5th anniversary. There was even a grocery list written in both their handwritings, a mundane reminder of how their lives had become beautifully intertwined. "What do we do with all this?" Kate asked, her voice thick with emotion. William stared at the collection of memories spread out on the floor between them. These were the artifacts of their love story, the physical evidence of 17 years together. "How do you divide a shared history? How do you decide who gets to keep the proof that your love existed?" "Maybe we make copies of the photos and split everything else," William suggested. "Or maybe we each take the things that meant the most to us personally." Kate picked up one of the love letters, her fingers tracing the envelope that bore her name in William's familiar handwriting. "Remember this? You wrote it when you went to that conference in Chicago and we talked on the phone every night for a week." William did remember. It had been early in their marriage and a week apart had felt like an eternity. He had written the letter on hotel stationery, pouring out his feelings and his excitement about coming home to her. Reading it now would probably break his heart, but he was touched that Kate had kept it all these years. "You can have that one," he said, "and I'd like to keep the one you wrote me when I was deciding whether to apply for the master's program." Kate nodded, understanding exactly which letter he meant. She had written it during a difficult time when William was doubting himself and his abilities as a teacher. Her words had given him the confidence to pursue his dreams, and her belief in him had sustained him through 2 years of night classes and weekend studying. They spent the next hour carefully dividing their memory box, creating 2 smaller collections that each told a part of their story. Some decisions were easy. Kate kept the items related to her nursing career, while William took the things connected to his teaching. Other decisions required more thought and discussion. The hardest item to divide was a small silver locket that William had given Kate for their 10th anniversary. Inside were tiny photos of both of them, so small they were barely recognizable but precious beyond measure. Kate had worn it every day for 5 years before the clasp broke, and she reluctantly retired it to the memory box. "You should keep it," William said when Kate hesitated over the locket. "But you gave it to me. It should go back to you." "I gave it to you because I wanted you to have something that would remind you how much I loved you. That hasn't changed, even if everything else has." Kate closed her fingers around the locket, tears flowing freely now. "I'm going to miss this so much, William. I'm going to miss us." William moved closer and pulled her into his arms, holding her as she cried. He felt his own tears falling into her hair, and for a moment they just held each other, grieving the end of their marriage as if they were mourning a death. In many ways, that's exactly what it was. The couple they had been, William and Kate, the teacher's lounge romance the neighbors everyone envied, the pair who finished each other's sentences and shared inside jokes. That couple was dying. Tomorrow they would begin the process of becoming 2 separate people again, carrying pieces of each other but no longer whole together. "I'm scared," Kate whispered against his chest. "What if I can't do this without you? What if I get to North Carolina and realize I've made a terrible mistake?" William stroked her hair, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo for what might be one of the last times. You're the strongest person I know, Kate. You're going to do amazing things in that hospital. You're going to save lives and make a difference, and you're going to be proud of yourself in ways you can't even imagine right now. But what if I'm lonely? What if I can't make friends, or I hate my new apartment, or I miss you so much I can't function? Then you call me, William said without hesitation. Just because we're getting divorced doesn't mean we stop caring about each other. We're not going to be husband and wife anymore, but we'll always be important to each other. Kate pulled back to look at his face. Do you really think we can stay friends? Or is that just something people say to make divorce feel less awful? William considered the question seriously. Could they really maintain a friendship after the end of their marriage? Would it be too painful to hear about each other's new lives, new relationships, new happiness that didn't include the other person? I don't know, he admitted. But I'd like to try. Maybe not right away. We'll probably both need some time to adjust to our new lives. But eventually, I hope we can be friends. I hope we can call each other on birthdays and send Christmas cards and maybe even visit someday when enough time has passed. I'd like that too, Kate said. I can't imagine a world where you're not in my life at all. They finished packing their memory boxes as the afternoon sun slanted through the windows. Each box contained about half of their shared treasures, but somehow William felt like they were both taking the whole story with them. The physical items were divided, but the memories they represented belonged equally to both of them. As evening approached, they ordered pizza from their favorite local restaurant and ate it sitting on the floor of their nearly empty living room. The house felt hollow around them, echoing their voices in a way it never had when it was full of their furniture and their life together. Remember our first night in this house? Kate asked, looking around at the bare walls where their pictures used to hang. We didn't have any furniture yet, so we ate Chinese takeout sitting on the floor just like this, William recalled. You said it felt like we were camping in our own home. And you said it was the most romantic dinner you'd ever had because we were finally homeowners. They had been so young then, so excited about their future together. The house had seemed huge and full of possibilities. They had planned which room would be the nursery, where they would put the Christmas tree, how they would landscape the backyard. All of those dreams were packed away now, along with everything else. After dinner, they walked through the house one more time, each room triggering a flood of memories. The kitchen where Kate had learned to cook and William had learned to appreciate her experimental cuisine. The living room where they had hosted game nights and holiday parties. The bedroom where they had shared so many quiet mornings and intimate conversations. 2 more days, Kate said as they stood in the doorway of their bedroom. 2 more days, William agreed, and they spent their last full evening in the house playing cards and talking about everything, except the fact that their marriage was ending in 48 hours. Tuesday arrived with an unseasonable warmth that made the October morning feel like a gift. William woke first, as he had every morning for the past 15 years, and lay quietly watching Kate sleep beside him. Her face was peaceful in the early light, free from the sadness that had marked her features for weeks now. In sleep, she looked like the young woman he had married, full of dreams and possibilities. This was their last morning waking up together. Tomorrow Kate would sleep in a hotel room across town, preparing for her drive to North Carolina. William would wake up alone in their bed, surrounded by the boxes and empty spaces that marked the end of their marriage. He slipped out of bed carefully, not wanting to wake her yet, and padded to the kitchen to make coffee. The morning routine felt both familiar and strange. Familiar because he had done it thousands of times before. Strange because it would be the last time he would make coffee for both of them in their shared kitchen. Kate appeared in the doorway just as the coffee finished brewing, wearing the oversized t-shirt she always slept in, and looking younger than her 38 years. Her hair was tousled from sleep and she had the soft, slightly confused expression she always wore first thing in the morning. Good morning, she said quietly, accepting the mug he offered her. Good morning, he replied, and they stood together by the kitchen window, looking out at the backyard where they had planted flowers together each spring and raked leaves together each fall. The movers will be here in 2 hours, Kate said, stating the obvious because sometimes the most important things needed to be said out loud. I know. William sipped his coffee, trying to memorize this moment, the taste of the coffee, the warmth of the morning sun through the window, the sight of Kate in her pajamas holding her favorite mug, the quiet intimacy of their shared morning ritual. They had spent the previous evening in a strange state of suspended animation, both of them reluctant to go to bed because it would bring them closer to the end. They had talked about practical things: where to forward mail, how to handle their joint bank account, what to do about their shared cell phone plan. But underneath the logistics there had been an undercurrent of grief that neither of them knew how to address. Now, as they stood in their kitchen for the last time as a married couple, the weight of their decision settled around them like a heavy blanket. The movers would come and take away Kate's belongings, loading them into a truck that would carry her life away from this place, away from him. By this time tomorrow she would be gone. "I've been thinking about what you said the other day," Kate said, breaking the comfortable silence. "About staying friends. About calling each other." William turned to look at her, noting the way the morning light caught the red highlights in her hair. "What about it?" "I think we should set some boundaries, at least at first. Not because I don't want to talk to you, but because I think it might be too hard, at least until we both adjust to our new lives." William felt something twist in his chest, but he knew she was right. The temptation to call each other every day, to maintain their connection through phone calls and text messages, would probably make it harder for both of them to move forward. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "Maybe we don't talk for the first 6 months," Kate said, her voice carefully controlled. "Let ourselves really settle into our new lives. And then maybe around Easter we could call each other, just to check in to see how we're doing." Easter, 6 months from now. It seemed both impossibly far away and terrifyingly close. 6 months without hearing Kate's voice, without knowing how her day went, without sharing the small moments and observations that had been the fabric of their daily life together. "That makes sense," William said, even though the words felt like swallowing glass. "It'll give us both time to figure out who we are on our own." Kate nodded, but he could see tears gathering in her eyes. "I just want you to know that the silence doesn't mean I don't care about you. It doesn't mean I'm not thinking about you or wondering how you're doing. It just means I'm trying to learn how to be Kate instead of Kate and William." "I understand," William said, and he did, even though understanding didn't make it hurt any less. The sound of a large truck rumbling down their quiet street interrupted the moment. Through the window they could see the moving truck backing into their driveway, followed by a smaller van carrying the crew who would pack up Kate's life and take it away. "They're here," Kate said unnecessarily. William set down his coffee mug and took her hand. "Are you ready for this?" Kate squeezed his fingers, her touch both familiar and precious. "No, but I don't think anyone is ever ready to watch their marriage get loaded into a truck." The next 4 hours passed in a blur of activity that felt both too fast and endless. The movers were efficient and professional, wrapping Kate's furniture in blankets and carefully packing her dishes and books. They had clearly done this many times before, approaching the dissolution of a household with the same practiced competence they would bring to any other job. William and Kate stayed out of the way for the most part, supervising from the sidelines as their life together was systematically dismantled. Kate had marked everything that belonged to her with small blue stickers, a system that now seemed almost absurdly organized for something so emotionally chaotic. The hardest moment came when the movers carried out the rocking chair that had belonged to Kate's grandmother. Kate had always imagined rocking her own children to sleep in that chair. And even after they had accepted that children might not be part of their story, the chair had remained a symbol of the family they had hoped to build. Now it was going to a new city where Kate would be starting over alone. William found himself memorizing details he had never paid attention to before. The way Kate chewed her bottom lip when she was nervous. The way she twisted her wedding ring when she was thinking. The way she stood with one hand on her hip when she was trying to make a decision. These small gestures and habits had been part of the background of his life for so long that he had stopped seeing them. Now, knowing he wouldn't see them much longer, each one felt precious and worth remembering. By noon, Kate's belongings were loaded and ready to go. The truck looked enormous sitting in their driveway, capable of holding an entire life inside its metal walls. Kate would follow it to North Carolina, driving her car while her possessions rode ahead of her toward her new beginning. The moving crew left to grab lunch before beginning their journey south, leaving William and Kate alone in the house that now looked strange and hollow with half its contents gone. Kate's absence was already visible in the empty spaces where her bookshelves had stood, in the blank walls where her paintings had hung, in the kitchen that looked too large without her collection of colorful dishes. "I should go soon," Kate said, standing in the middle of their living room with her purse in one hand and her car keys in the other. I want to get to the hotel in Richmond before it gets dark. William nodded, knowing this moment had been coming all day but still feeling unprepared for it. They had said their practical goodbyes over the past few days, divided their belongings, closed their joint accounts, signed the papers that would make their divorce official. But the emotional goodbye, the final farewell that would end their marriage, was still ahead of them. Kate, he said, then stopped, not sure what words could possibly be adequate for this moment. She looked at him with eyes that were bright with unshed tears, and William realized that she was waiting for him to say something that would make sense of what they were doing, something that would provide meaning or comfort or closure. But he had no such words. He only had love and loss and the terrible certainty that they were making the right decision, even though it was breaking both their hearts. Instead of speaking, he crossed the room and pulled her into his arms. Kate dropped her purse and keys and wrapped her arms around him, holding him as tightly as he was holding her. They stood that way for a long time, not speaking, just feeling the warmth and familiarity of each other's bodies, memorizing the sensation of being close. I love you, Kate whispered against his chest. I want you to know that this has nothing to do with not loving you. I love you so much, William. I always will. I love you too, William replied, his voice thick with emotion. More than I've ever loved anyone or anything. You've been the best part of my life for 17 years. They held each other until they heard the moving truck return, its engine noise breaking the spell of their private goodbye. Kate pulled back and wiped her eyes, trying to compose herself for the practical business of leaving. I'll call you when I get to the hotel tonight, she said, then immediately shook her head. No, I won't. We said 6 months, and we should stick to that. 6 months, William agreed, though every instinct in his body was screaming at him to ask her to stay, to tell her they could figure out another way, to beg her not to get in her car and drive away from their life together. Kate picked up her purse and keys, then paused at the front door. Take care of yourself, William. Eat vegetables and don't work too late, and remember to call your mother. You too, he said. Drive safely and call your parents when you get settled, and don't be afraid to ask for help if you need it. They were giving each other the same gentle instructions they had shared countless times over the years, the small expressions of care that had woven themselves into the fabric of their marriage. Even now, even as they were saying goodbye forever, they couldn't stop taking care of each other. Kate opened the front door and stepped onto the porch, then turned back one last time. Goodbye, William. Goodbye, Kate. She walked to her car without looking back, and William stood in the doorway watching as she drove away, following the moving truck that carried her life toward a future that wouldn't include him. He stayed there until both vehicles disappeared around the corner, and then he closed the door and found himself alone in the house they had shared for 15 years, surrounded by the echo of their love and the silence of its ending. The silence in the house was deafening. William stood in the entryway for what felt like hours after Kate's car disappeared, listening to the tick of the grandfather clock that had belonged to his grandmother and the distant hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. These were sounds that had always been there, buried beneath the comfortable noise of their shared life. Conversations and laughter, the television in the evening, Kate humming while she cooked dinner. Now, with Kate gone, these background sounds felt overwhelming in their prominence. He walked through the house slowly, seeing it with new eyes. The living room looked cavernous without Kate's furniture. Her reading chair was gone, leaving an awkward gap next to the window where she used to sit with her morning coffee and a medical journal. The built-in bookshelves looked like a mouth with missing teeth, half empty now that Kate had taken her collection of nursing textbooks and the novels she loved to read before bed. In the kitchen, the absence of Kate's colorful dishes made the remaining white plates and bowls look stark and institutional. The refrigerator, once covered with photos and shopping lists and appointment cards, now displayed only a few magnets holding up nothing. Even the spice rack looked lonely with half its bottles gone. Kate had taken all the exotic seasonings she used for the elaborate meals she loved to experiment with, leaving behind only the basics that William actually knew how to use. The bedroom was perhaps the hardest room to enter. Kate's side of the closet was completely empty, just bare hangers and the faint scent of her perfume clinging to the air. Her nightstand was cleared off, no longer holding the stack of books she was always meaning to read, the small lamp she used for late-night reading when she couldn't sleep, the framed photo of her parents that had sat there for 15 years. William sat down on the edge of the bed, on what had been his side, and stared at the empty space where Kate used to sleep. The comforter looked too big for just one person, the pillows oddly arranged without Kate's organizational system. For 15 years they had shared this bed, this room, this intimate space where they had talked about their days and their dreams, where they had comforted each other through illnesses and disappointments, where they had made love and made plans and made promises they had ultimately been unable to keep. His phone buzzed with a text message, and for a moment his heart leaped with the irrational hope that it was Kate, saying she had changed her mind, asking him to come get her. But it was just his mother, checking to see how he was doing and offering to bring him dinner. William stared at the message for a long time before responding. His mother had been calling every day since they had told the family about the divorce, clearly worried about both him and Kate, but not sure how to help. She had offered practical assistance, help with packing, freezer meals for after Kate left, even the suggestion that he move back into his childhood bedroom temporarily if the house felt too empty. "I'm okay," he typed back, though he wasn't sure if that was true. "Thank you for thinking of me. Are you sure you don't want me to come over?" She responded almost immediately. "I could bring that soup you used to love when you were sick." William smiled despite his sadness. His mother's solution to every crisis was food and maternal attention, and while he appreciated the gesture, he knew he needed to face this alone. He needed to learn how to be by himself in this house, how to exist as just William instead of William and Kate. "Maybe tomorrow," he typed. "Tonight I think I need some quiet." As evening approached, William found himself at loose ends. Usually he and Kate would be thinking about dinner by now, discussing what to cook or whether to order takeout. Kate might be telling him about a difficult patient or asking about his day with the students. They would be settling into the comfortable routine of their shared evening, the small rituals and conversations that had structured their life together. Instead, William heated up a can of soup and ate it standing at the kitchen counter, the silence pressing in around him like a weight. He tried turning on the television, but the laugh track of a sitcom felt jarring and false. He considered calling a friend, but realized he wasn't sure what he would say. How do you explain that you're grieving the end of a marriage that ended by mutual choice, that you're mourning a decision you made yourself? Around 8 o'clock, William decided to take a walk around the neighborhood. The October evening was crisp and clear, with the kind of golden light that made everything look softly beautiful. As he walked down the tree-lined streets he and Kate had walked together hundreds of times, he found himself noticing details he had somehow missed before. Mrs. Henderson was working in her garden, carefully preparing her flower beds for winter. She waved at William and called out a greeting, but didn't mention Kate's absence. Word had probably spread through the neighborhood about their divorce. News traveled fast in their small community, and several people had seen the moving truck that morning. At the end of their street, William encountered Tom and Sarah Mitchell, who were out walking their golden retriever. The Mitchells had been friends with him and Kate for years, often joining them for backyard barbecues and holiday parties. They had been among the first people William and Kate had told about their decision to divorce. "How are you holding up?" Sarah asked, her voice gentle with concern. "It's been a hard day," William admitted, "but I'm managing." Tom clapped him on the shoulder in the awkward way men do when they're not sure what to say. "If you need anything, help with the yard work, someone to watch the house when you're out of town, just let us know." "Kate got away okay?" Sarah asked. William nodded. "She should be in Richmond by now, getting ready for the drive to North Carolina tomorrow." They talked for a few more minutes about practical things, whether William planned to stay in the house, how his preparations for the move to Oregon were going. But underneath the surface conversation, William could sense their confusion and sadness about the situation. The Mitchells, like most of their friends, had seen him and Kate as a solid couple, the kind of marriage that would last forever. The news of their divorce had shocked everyone who knew them. As William continued his walk, he realized that this was going to be one of the ongoing challenges of his new life. People would want to understand why his marriage had ended, would look for someone to blame or some dramatic story that would make sense of the divorce. But the truth was more complicated and perhaps more tragic than a simple narrative of betrayal or incompatibility. He and Kate were ending their marriage not because they had stopped loving each other, but because they loved each other enough to let go. When he returned home, the house felt even quieter than before. William made himself a cup of tea and sat in the living room, trying to imagine what Kate was doing at that moment. She was probably in a hotel room somewhere in Virginia, exhausted from the drive and the emotional weight of the day. She might be calling her parents to let them know she had arrived safely, or maybe she was just sitting alone in an unfamiliar room, processing the reality of what they had done. For a moment, William was overwhelmed by the urge to call her. He wanted to hear her voice, to know that she was okay, to maintain the connection that had been the foundation of his adult life. His phone was right there on the coffee table, and he knew Kate's number by heart. Had been dialing it for 17 years. But he remembered their agreement about the 6 months of no contact, and he understood the wisdom behind it. Calling Kate now would be giving in to his grief rather than dealing with it, would be trying to maintain their relationship in a form that was no longer healthy for either of them. Instead, he went to his computer and opened a new document. Maybe he couldn't talk to Kate, but he could write to her, could put his thoughts and feelings into words even if she would never see them. "Dear Kate," he began, then stopped, staring at the cursor blinking on the screen. What did he want to say? That he missed her already? That he was proud of her for being brave enough to pursue her dream? That he hoped she would be happy in her new life, even though the thought of her happiness without him felt like a knife in his chest? He wrote for an hour, pouring out his love and his grief and his hopes for both their futures. He told Kate about the empty spaces in the house, about the neighbors who had asked about her, about the can of soup he had eaten alone for dinner. He wrote about his fears and his loneliness and his certainty that they had made the right choice, even though it was the hardest thing he had ever done. When he finished, he saved the document in a folder he labeled Letters to Kate and closed the computer. Maybe someday, years from now, he would share these letters with her. Maybe they would read them together and remember this time in their lives when love had meant letting go. Or maybe the letters would remain private, a way for him to process his feelings during the long months ahead. William went to bed that night in a house that felt too big and too quiet, sleeping alone in a bed that felt too wide without Kate beside him. As he lay in the darkness, he thought about Kate in her hotel room, probably lying awake in an unfamiliar bed, listening to unfamiliar sounds from the hallway and the street outside. Tomorrow, she would wake up and drive the rest of the way to North Carolina, to the new job and the new life that awaited her. And William would wake up and begin the process of learning how to live alone, how to be happy on his own terms, how to build a future that honored the love he and Kate had shared, while accepting that their story together had come to an end. The last thing William saw before he fell asleep was the empty pillow beside him, still bearing the faint impression of Kate's head from the night before, a small reminder of the love that had filled this house for 15 years, and the silence that would fill it now. 6 months later, the cherry tree outside William's new apartment in Portland was beginning to bloom. He stood at his kitchen window on a rainy April morning, watching the delicate pink petals emerge from their buds, and thought about Kate. Today was Easter Sunday, the day they had agreed they might reach out to each other for the first time since their divorce. The past 6 months had been the most challenging and transformative of William's life. The move to Oregon had been harder than he had expected, not just practically but emotionally. Everything was unfamiliar. The coffee shops, the grocery stores, the routes to work, even the way the light fell differently through windows that faced west instead of east. For weeks he had felt untethered, like an astronaut floating in space without the gravitational pull of his old life to orient him. But slowly, day by day, he had begun to build something new. His job at the private school had turned out to be everything he had hoped for and more. The students were bright and eager, and the administration gave him the freedom to develop innovative teaching methods that had been just dreams in his previous position. He had started a creative writing program for the gifted students and had seen young minds light up with the joy of storytelling, in ways that reminded him why he had become a teacher in the first place. His apartment was small but comfortable, with hardwood floors and large windows that let in the gray Pacific Northwest light. He had furnished it simply, keeping only the belongings that felt truly his rather than items that carried too many memories of his life with Kate. The result was a space that felt peaceful and uncluttered, a reflection of the man he was becoming rather than the man he had been. William had made friends slowly but genuinely. There was Marcus, a fellow teacher who shared his love of hiking and had introduced him to the mountain trails that surrounded Portland. There was Elena, his neighbor, who had appeared at his door one day with homemade cookies and an invitation to join the building's book club. There was Dr. Jennifer Park, the school psychologist, who had become a close friend and confidant, someone he could talk to about the complex emotions of rebuilding his life after divorce. The loneliness had been intense at first, particularly in the evenings when he would catch himself reaching for his phone to call Kate about something funny that had happened at work or a movie he thought she would enjoy. But gradually he had learned to sit with the solitude, to find peace in his own company, to appreciate the quiet moments that belonged only to him. He had started writing again, something he hadn't done since college. Every evening after dinner he would sit at his small desk and write, sometimes stories, sometimes reflections on his day, sometimes letters to Kate that he saved in an ever-growing folder on his computer. The writing had become a way of processing his emotions, of making sense of his new life, of staying connected to the part of himself that existed independently of any relationship. Now, as he stood at his window watching the cherry blossoms emerge, William felt a mixture of nervousness and anticipation about the phone call he was planning to make. He and Kate had agreed to wait 6 months before contacting each other, and Easter Sunday marked exactly 6 months since the day she had driven away from their shared life. He had been thinking about this call for weeks, wondering what they would say to each other, whether their voices would sound different after so much time apart. William made himself breakfast and read the Sunday paper, trying to establish a normal rhythm to the morning before making the call that felt so momentous. He wondered what Kate was doing at that moment. Was she also thinking about their agreement to reconnect today? Had she built a new life for herself in North Carolina, made friends, found happiness in her work at the Children's Hospital? He had resisted the urge to look her up online during the past 6 months, wanting to respect the boundaries they had set and allow both of them the space to grow without the pull of constant connection. But he had thought about her every day, wondered about her well-being, hoped that she was finding joy in her new beginning. At noon, William finally picked up his phone and dialed the number he still knew by heart. His hands were shaking slightly as he waited for the call to connect, and he realized that he was more nervous than he had been for any conversation in years. "Hello?" Kate's voice was exactly the same as he remembered it, warm and slightly musical, and hearing it made William's chest tight with emotion. "Kate, it's William," he said, his own voice sounding strange to his ears. "William." There was a pause, and then Kate laughed, a sound that was part joy and part nervousness. "I've been staring at my phone for an hour trying to decide whether to call you." "I'm glad I called first then," William said, settling into his favorite chair by the window. "How are you?" "Really, how are you?" "I'm good," Kate said, and William could hear the surprise in her own voice. "Really good, actually. It's been hard, and there have been days when I've felt so lonely I could barely function. But overall, I'm good." "How about you?" "The same," William said. "Hard but good. Different than I expected." They talked for over an hour, sharing the stories of their separate journeys over the past 6 months. Kate told him about her job at the Children's Hospital, how she had been overwhelmed at first by the intensity of caring for critically ill children, but had found a sense of purpose she had never experienced before. She described her small apartment near the hospital, the hiking group she had joined, the volunteer work she was doing at a local animal shelter. "I got a dog," she said, and William could hear the smile in her voice. "A rescue pit bull mix named Charlie. He's the sweetest thing, and he's helped with the loneliness more than I expected." William told her about his teaching position, about the creative writing program that had become his passion project, about the friends he was making and the hiking trails he was discovering. He described his apartment and his writing, the quiet life he was building for himself in a city that was slowly beginning to feel like home. "Do you ever regret it?" Kate asked quietly. "Do you ever wish we had tried harder to make it work?" William considered the question carefully. There had been moments, particularly in the darkest days of winter, when he had wondered if they had given up too easily, if there might have been another way. But the regret had faded as he had settled into his new life, as he had discovered parts of himself that had been dormant during their marriage. "Sometimes I miss us," he said honestly, "but I don't regret the choice we made. I think we needed to do this, Kate. I think we needed to find out who we were as individuals before we could be truly happy." "I think so too," Kate said. "And William, I want you to know that I'm proud of you. From what you've told me about your teaching and your writing, it sounds like you're becoming the person you were always meant to be." I'm proud of you too, William replied. You always said you wanted to make a real difference in children's lives, and it sounds like you're doing exactly that. As their conversation wound down, they made tentative plans to stay in touch more regularly, perhaps a phone call once a month and emails when they had news to share. The friendship they had hoped might be possible was beginning to take shape, different from their marriage but rooted in the same deep care and affection they had always shared. Thank you for calling today, Kate said as they prepared to hang up. I wasn't sure if we would actually go through with it, but I'm so glad we did. Me too, William said. Take care of yourself, Kate, and give Charlie a pat from me. After they hung up, William sat in his chair for a long time, watching the rain fall on the cherry blossoms outside his window. The conversation had left him feeling peaceful in a way he hadn't expected. Hearing Kate's voice, knowing that she was happy and fulfilled in her new life, had somehow made his own journey feel more complete. That evening, William opened his computer and began writing a new letter. But this one was different from the others he had written over the past 6 months. This one wasn't full of grief and longing, but rather gratitude and hope. Dear Kate, he wrote, thank you for today and for the 17 years that came before it. Thank you for loving me well and for having the courage to let me go when it was time. Thank you for showing me that sometimes the most loving thing two people can do is trust each other enough to build separate lives. I hope your cherry trees are blooming wherever you are. I hope Charlie is making you laugh and your patients are healing under your care. I hope you're as happy as you sounded today, and I hope we can continue to be part of each other's story, even if the chapters we're writing now are our own. With love and gratitude, William. As William saved the letter and closed his computer, he felt a sense of completion that had eluded him for months. He and Kate had said their quiet goodbye 6 months ago, but today they had said hello to the new relationship they were building, not as husband and wife, but as two people who had loved each other well and would continue to care about each other from a distance. The rain had stopped and the evening light was beginning to fade. William made himself dinner and settled in with a book, content in his solitude and grateful for the conversation that had reminded him that love could take many forms. Outside, the cherry blossoms continued their patient bloom, beautiful and temporary like all the best things in life. Their marriage was over, but their story would continue in new ways, written in separate lives that had been shaped by the love they had shared. And perhaps, William thought as he read by the window in his quiet apartment, that was the most beautiful ending they could have written together. Not a dramatic conclusion, but a gentle transformation into something different and equally meaningful. In the end, their quiet goodbye had not been an ending at all, but a beginning disguised as farewell. A love story that continued even after love had changed its form. And that realization filled William with a peace he had not felt since the morning Kate had driven away, carrying part of his heart with her toward a future they would both face with courage, wisdom, and the enduring gift of having loved each other well.